Bonjour à tous et bienvenue sur ce sommet de l'EFT dans l'éducation. Je suis Anne Siret, à la fois votre hôtesse et l'organisatrice de ce sommet virtuel pour le compte du programme EFT en classe. Avant de présenter cette conférence, je voulais vous féliciter d'accepter de prendre la responsabilité de votre propre bien-être et celui des enfants. L'EFT, même si c'est un moyen puissant et efficace pour contribuer au bien-être physique, social et émotionnel, n'est aucunement un substitut aux soins médicaux ou aux traitements de santé mentale. C'est pourquoi il est conseillé que, lors de l'utilisation ou du partage de l'EFT avec d'autres personnes, vous soumettiez les cas qui sont au-delà de votre niveau de compétence à un professionnel. Ceci étant dit, c'est un grand plaisir pour moi de vous présenter aujourd'hui notre intervenante et conférencière, Patsy Anthony, avec qui nous allons discuter de comment l'EFT peut être utilisé en classe de façon simple et efficace pour aider les enfants à surmonter leurs difficultés et reconnaître leur potentiel illimité. Patsy, enseignante canadienne depuis plus de 30 ans, inspirée par la façon dont l'EFT lui a permis de récupérer sa santé, entre autres pour la maladie de Crohn, et de vaincre ses phobies de l'avion et de la prise de parole en public, n'a pas résisté à le transmettre à ses élèves pour les aider à gérer le stress des examens, ainsi que toutes les émotions perturbantes qu'un enfant peut vivre et qui bloquent sa réussite. Avec l'espoir d'inspirer tous ceux qui aiment les enfants, elle a développé une approche exceptionnelle pour enseigner l'EFT aux enfants, que l'on peut d'ailleurs retrouver dans son livre traduit en français, l'EFT à l'école, qui est un véritable guide pour tout éducateur.
Hi, hello, welcome Patsy, and thank you very much to be here and to be part of this summit, the first French summit, EFT in the education or EFT of tapping. So, welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
And just I want to let everyone know that you are actually in Canada, just a city a bit of Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. Just north of Vancouver, yes.
And I think it's great to have people all around the world like Till Schilling, Brad Yates, and so I wanted you be part of this summit because you are a teacher, or you have been a teacher, and for many years, and you will let us know your story with EFT, how you come to use, why you begin to use EFT and with the children, but firstly with yourself. So I'll let you introduce in one way your story to everyone.
Okay. I started teaching in 1981, and soon after I developed a disease called Crohn's disease, and I had my ups and downs with it. But in 2004, I started to get sick again, and 2006, I was recommended to try EFT for helping with the physical illness and the stresses of life and teaching, and so I started using EFT. I learned it with an EFT master, Andy Bryce, and immediately I started feeling better. Just things didn't bother me as much. I wasn't so stressed, and my health started improving too. And I was able to get rid of a flying phobia, a very intense flying phobia, 10 out of 10. I would not fly anywhere, and now I'm flying a lot. So that was incredible. I was able to totally get rid of a public speaking phobia. And also my whole health started to improve. And as well as a very, very sore knee that I had with arthritis. I just tapped on that. So having such great results for myself, I thought I'd try it with the kids. And one day, just spur of the moment, I was giving them a math test with grade 4s. And I asked them if any of them felt stressed by this test that they had, because it was a weekly test. They had to answer 100 questions in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I hadn't really, I know, go. And I hadn't really paid any attention to their feelings. I mean, I knew they were stressed, some of them, but anyways, one day I said to them, how do you feel about having these speak tests? Are any of you stressed about them? And most of them put their hands up. And so then I said, well, I'd like to share a technique with you that I've found recently that's really helped me with my own stresses and worries, and it's called tapping. And so I drew a river on the board of a calm river in the forest. And I said to them, imagine your mind is a river. And when you're in the flow and you feel good and you don't have any stresses or worries, you can do your best. This river is, your mind is like this river. But what happens if a tree falls across the river? And the tree represents stress. What happens to the flow of your mind? So we talked about what happens to their mind, their thinking skills, how they felt in their bodies about stress and the tests. And then I just fed them back some of their own words, because that's really important to have a conversation about their own feelings first. And we just did some setup on the karate chop, even though I feel really stressed about this test and I have to be really speedy, and it's hard to be speedy and do your best at the same time. I'm still an awesome kid. And we just did a couple of rounds. I incorporated their words, and then they went back and they wrote the test. And it was I just threw it out to see how they would do. And at the end of the test, we marked. And one boy he had trouble with speed. He had some processing challenges. And he stood up and he said, I got 100%. And he was over the moon. He'd never, ever achieved a perfect test score before, because his mind would get blocked. And everybody did better from the previous week. So from then we just started trying tapping on anything that came up in the classroom. And I just learned so many lessons about tapping with children, and as well as them. But they taught me a lot too about emotions and how important it is to acknowledge your emotions and give kids permission to feel them, and also give them this wonderful tool that will help them to express and manage their emotions in safe and appropriate ways. So it was a blessing that one day just went forward with it.
And during how many years finally did you use tapping?
I started tapping with the kids in 2007, so about 10 years, in the classroom with the kids. And now, I'm not teaching in a classroom now, but I do go into different classrooms and teach with children. Mm-hmm.
And that's come with the marvelous book. I think you have it in English.
I do have it in English. Here it is.
It's all finally your experience of 10 years of
tapping with children. All my experience, yes. And some lessons to help teachers and parents who are interested in introducing tapping with their children and don't know how to start.
Okay, so that's really great to have this book, because I'm sure it's very useful for everyone in the world. For us, it has been translated, and I have to say that's very good. And we use it in the program EFT en classe when we're doing some training for the teacher. And just let me know, last time when we talked, you were mentioning Brad Yates and the work you did with him for this book.
Oh, okay. Well, I had got over my public speaking fears, so I could speak in Vancouver at an EFT gathering, and I think that was 2011. And I had put together a lot of my notes about tapping with children, because people all over the world seem to be very interested about this topic. And so once I got over my fears and I was able to present this, then I thought, well, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book, and I went to see Brad Yates in Vancouver a couple of years later. Yeah. And I was not feeling super confident about this book, but he found out that I'd written it, and he had me do a whole round in front of the group with everybody about just revving up my confidence so I could get the book out, because he really believes that it's so important for children, as well as the people who love the children, to learn the tapping. And so he took me under his wing, and he helped me to complete and publish and get this book out into the world. And he's been great. I use his Wizard's Wish book all the time when I introduce tapping to children. It's a great resource to when you just want to go into a classroom and teach them what tapping is and how it can help them.
Yes, and we had an interview with Brad, and I just let know the people about this book during this interview. But
yes, and I was, here's mine. It's so used that it's falling apart, but
but I'm very grateful about all these people like you that introduced EFT many years ago when it was a bit yucky, when we say. And no, because with all the research and the background, you know, and EFT, it's not so difficult to introduce into classroom. But before, we didn't have so many studies and evidence-based, you know.
That's right. And now we can link it to the science. But at first, when I first started, I would get emails from teachers around the world. How do you get away, or how do you get permission to do this? Or how do you get away with teaching tapping? And I just said, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just teaching children calming points, you know, stimulating their calming points, and also just affirmations that whatever their problems are, they're still awesome children, amazing children. And so I never had anyone question me.
No problem with the parents?
No, nothing, no. But now I was in a classroom a couple of weeks ago with grade 5s and 6, and it was great to introduce the topic of anxiety, worry, stresses, because now we can link it to the flight, fight, and freeze. And I took in this picture of, you know, saber-toothed tiger, and you know, the story about in the olden days, cavemen, you know, when they were afraid, they would either run or fight the saber-toothed tiger. But now we seem to be in chronic stress in our society, and we can't turn that stress off. And so we often, and so we go into a freeze. And so when we're in freeze, we can't think straight, and we can't do our best. And so tapping is excellent for just calming the amygdala, reducing the cortisol levels, and getting children into that state of mind where they can achieve the best they can do, as well as also giving them permission not to be perfect. I think that's important for children when you're tapping.
Yeah, yeah. And what about, finally, you're talking about the stress and effectively the world now. We have so many stress, but what about the stress of the teachers?
Oh. Well, I have to say, I retired from being a classroom teacher almost 2 years ago, and I did not realize how much I was under chronic stress on a day-to-day basis with that job. I loved it, but if you're not in the classroom, you're thinking about the classroom and all the kids, and you're holding on to all their worries and all their traumas and all their problems for them. And you're also, well, I don't know about every teacher, but I tended to second guess if I wasn't perfect and reaching all the children that I needed to. So I just found tapping has been excellent for me to just help with all the stresses of the classroom. Out of the classroom, you know.
Sorry, Patsy, could you shut down your video?
Oh, okay. Did I freeze? Stop video? Okay. Start video.
That's
okay,
it.
Where
again. You know, because when you begin to speak about stress, you freeze like the tree. And just the video freeze.
A metaphor for stress. I froze. Okay. So we were talking about
yeah, we could hear you. It was fine. It was just you.
Okay. And also times when I mean, you're juggling so many relationships as a teacher, with your children, with your coworkers, with the administration, and with the parents. And, you know, relationships don't always go smoothly. And tapping is a fantastic tool for when you have stresses with relationships.
Yes,
in the job.
I think we don't think about that too much, the relation with the parents, with the co-workers and the administration. We're just thinking about the stress of the teacher in the classroom with their children, but there are so many other relationships you have to deal with.
And one thing that I found consistently, whenever I tapped on a problem that I was having with someone else, when I changed my own energy with tapping, it seemed like the other person would change their energy too. So be it a child, if I was having a struggle with a child or with a parent, it was almost like magic sometimes, the way the relationship would turn around after I relieved my own emotions with tapping.
And let us know about how the children finally use the tool in the classroom. Did you use to help them? They use the tool by themselves? How did you manage to put a routine or something like that in the classroom?
Well, I think it's really important for the children to see how relevant it is in different aspects of their lives. So once we used it for test anxiety, then we would try it on different things. And actually the next day, the following day after we had done the test, I noticed a little girl. I had taught a lesson to the children about fractions, and I'd done a terrible job. And the next day I saw this little child. She was back at her seat doing this.
Right.
And I said, "Do fractions stress you out that much?" And she said, "Yes." And I thought, wow, this is a really great tool, because children started to use it to show me when they were frustrated or upset about something. So if ever I saw them doing this in the classroom, that would take precedence to anyone having their hand up.
Yeah, that's
because
great.
I knew that they were working at frustration.
And so
you know, they'd come in the morning and do that. Also, I would try to do things so that, I mean, we all have challenges in life. What we need to teach children is how to be resilient, and not to take away their challenges for them, because they're not learning to work through them, but to set up challenges so that they find ways that they can get through them and feel really good about themselves. So we did a lot of drama in my classroom, and so they would always get nervous about performing on stage, most of them. And so that was a really good opportunity for them to tap as well, just to get over their stage fright. One time I had a girl who refused to go on just before a performance at the high school. She was the star of the show. And she said, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not going on." And they were all in their costumes. And I thought, okay, so I took her aside and we tapped for 3 minutes. And she went on and she did a brilliant job. But I just kept thinking, if she hadn't had the tapping, she would have constantly remembered her failure for not going, or her perceived failure for not going on. So this way she was able to overcome her fears and feel proud of herself and know that she could do it.
Yeah, which make a huge difference for the future of these girls. Yes.
When they have something that they know they can get over their fear with, they took it, the kids would just start taking the tapping out into the community. So they would use it if they were in a hockey game or any sport. They used it at the dentist. They used it when they had an injury. So they started telling me about times that they would tap that would help them. And then they would also teach it to their parents. and say, "Oh, Mom, you need to tap."
Did you have story about parents?
About parent? Well, one time a little girl came in. Her mom was an accountant, and she said her mom always got stressed in April because she had to do the taxes. So she was sitting down and trying to get her mom to tap with her. But yeah, no, I have parents who have done tapping with their kids, and kids who have done tapping with their siblings. One time a parent told me that she and her husband had separated, and the children were homesick when they were at their father's. And so the brother and the sister, they couldn't phone their mom, so they decided that they would just tap together about being homesick. And stories like that are just so sweet. There was another one about a little girl, and her brother was told to go to bed, and he was really upset. He wasn't allowed to stay up. And so he was crying, and she heard him cry, and she went next door into his bedroom. And then her mom was listening to this, and she could hear her daughter sit down with her son and say, "What's the matter? Do you want to tap?" Because they'd both been in my class, right? And so she just led him through like a little child practitioner until he calmed down.
That's wonderful.
Well, it is, because it teaches children how to be empathetic and compassionate and understand that everybody has feelings. Yeah. And that we have a tool to help them when they're upset.
So finally, if I could resume the way you're using tapping in the classroom, using that in a group session, group tapping session, and individually, or that's correct?
In a group, yes, we'll do it in a group, and sometimes it's helpful to invite one child up after doing group tapping, because it's very important to listen to the children's words and honor their own feelings, rather than just giving them the words. So if we do a couple of rounds together on something, like a test or like a performance or presentation or something that they're nervous about or they're going through, then invite someone to come up so we can model how you could tap with someone else too, and do buddy tapping. And just because really tapping is just having a gentle conversation with someone about their problems and their feelings about it.
So do you use tapping in the past? Are you using tapping daily, or?
Yeah, every day we would do a something called a math drill, where it was just, they would with flashcards to practice their math facts. And partly it was for them to practice the math facts, but I also wanted them to learn some really important life lessons. One, how to tap if you're nervous. So before they would get into the zone by just tapping on their points like that, and we wouldn't even say anything. It was just, I would start tapping because I knew that some of them would be nervous, and then most of them would start tapping too, and some of them just would have a favorite tapping point. So they would just tap on one point, which was great. Some of them tapped on their finger points like that to calm themselves. Sometimes in the morning, Monday morning, if they were sleepy. Sometimes if they would be wiggly, sitting too long. Okay, everybody, let's stand up and tap. Or we can play Simon Says to tapping, or just have some fun with it too, because the more you can bring fun and humor in, the more you're going to hook children.
So are you still doing now some training in tapping?
Pardon me?
Are you still doing training for teachers?
If I do the odd workshop, but I haven't recently done training for teachers as a group. I will go into classrooms and model it. And I think what's really important in doing that is that I go more than once, because just going in once isn't going to make it part of the classroom culture. And that's really important, to make it part of the classroom culture. So you're doing it all the time, and you're doing it as things come up. So if children are having a problem at recess time, they come in, they need you, then you just sit down and you tap, and it just becomes a tool for anytime they are upset about anything.
Okay, so great. So the good thing is to see finally we're using all the same tips everywhere in the world to make that working in the classroom. So that's great to listen to that. And we're using in our country a little tent, what we call a little teepee, which is a part of the class to let the child, you know, in a quiet place and do his tapping without be watching by the other. Are you using this kind of thing too?
Well, I would have 2 beanbag chairs in my classroom, and on the chairs I had Tappy Bear sitting. I'll show you Tappy Bear. Now, you've talked about Tappy. We don't have Tappy Bear anymore, but you can always get children to get a stuffed animal and just put stickers on the points. So any type of stuffed animal will do. And they would go to the chair if they needed me to tap with them, or they would just take Tappy Bear. But it would be our little place where we could tap together. And sometimes we would have to do group tapping for problem solving if they got into some problems with kids on the playground. It was a great time to use tapping because often the children would come in very reactive. If they felt that something was done to them or somebody was bullying them, and our first tendency is to want to be right rather than listen. And so I would just sit down and invite them to tap. If they didn't want to, that's fine. I never made anyone tap, but just say, I feel upset when you're upset, and so I'm going to tap for myself and for you, and I invite you to tap too. And I mean, pretty well all of them would. But I found that just diffusing the energy of reactiveness when everybody was heightened with anger was great. And it helped children listen mindfully too to each other and work out problems within just a few minutes. As opposed to before I used tapping, it would take forever to resolve problems, just talking through it. This way, with tapping, they got to honor their emotions, and also they would get to practice listening and be empathetic to other people. We called it empathy tapping in the classroom. So if somebody was upset, we would do empathy tapping for them. It's like surrogate tapping.
Yeah, surrogate tapping. Could you let know what we call surrogate tapping?
Yes, well, I just called it empathy tapping because I think empathy is really important to teach children to, understand that we all have emotions and to honor people's feelings when they are going through something.
And did you relate surrogate tapping with borrowing benefit?
Well, yes. Sometimes if we were working on something as a group that they would be nervous about, or like a play, I would have them come up, and one person who was a 10 suds, 10 out of 10, would come up and we would tap, but all the other children would tap for themselves as well as we were doing it. And if they weren't tapping for themselves because they weren't nervous, I would ask them to tap for the person who was. So they all had a reason to tap.
And it's always useful for yourself when you're doing tapping, even
always
for someone else.
Yes.
It's always an impact on your own well-being and emotional well-being. Yeah. And you were talking about the dentist. It's pretty funny because it's a really big issue for everyone, I think, at least for a lot of people. And but did you have to manage like some physical issue with the children? Because of course we have, the physical feeling, like when you are nervous, you have the butterfly, or, you're really anxious, and there is physical impact on your body. But we have also the physical issue that they could falling down in, somewhere. And did you have?
Oh, you mean for when they have pain, or how they feel when? So
No.
if they've injured themselves.
Well, yeah, it could be the physical issue, meaning when they have a pain due to a broken arm, or if they have a sickness or illness. Or
Yeah, the first time I was asked to help a child through their pain was I had just started tapping, and there was a girl on the soccer field. She was a teenager, and she dislocated her knee. I was watching the game because of my daughter. She was on my daughter's team. And I heard is there a doctor on the field? Is there a nurse on the field? Is there a Patsy on the field? And so I went out there, and they said, can you please tap? The mom said, can you please tap on my daughter? She's just in agony. And so I tapped on her points for her, with all these teenagers around watching me, just tapped on the points. And while we waited for the ambulance to come, and it was a great tool to use in that wait time. She told me later that she felt much better with the calming than with the drugs she was given with the ambulance attendants. But yeah, there were several accidents in the years when I taught in the classroom where tapping was very, very useful. There was a boy once, he had a flap of skin that was cut up from a hockey stick in gym, and it was lots and lots of blood. And so I just sat with him until his parents could take him to the hospital, and he was just green, and I just held his hand and I just tapped. And when and then I had to go back in my class and tap with the class, because they were so upset about seeing all this blood and the horrible thing, and the person who had accidentally hit him. And so that was a really, really intense tapping. But I said to the little boy a few days later, after he was all stitched up, I said, did the tapping help you at all when you were sitting waiting for your parents? And he said, yeah, it really did, because if you hadn't tapped on me, I would have thrown up for sure. So.
And yes, and I think it's a good example to let people that trauma, so you don't have to judge which kind of trauma. A little thing could be a big trauma for children, and everyone is different in front of trauma. But what we don't realize quite often is trauma has an impact on the people surrounding the person. And
it does.
Yeah.
And if we can address the trauma when it happens, and I found this for myself, if I can address any time I have an injury right away, mm-hmm. it doesn't stick with me. Okay. The emotional doesn't stick, and the pain doesn't stick either. So, and so if we can get to children when they're right on the spot and help them through their troubles that could become traumas later, because we don't know how they're perceiving what's going on in the classroom. And I know of adults who still remember times when they were children in the class, and things that they'll say about something that we think isn't a big deal that happened to them, and they're still triggered by it.
Yeah. And just again, if you can put the video off and on.
Oh, am I freezing? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
So, yes, I think it's really a big issue, trauma for everyone. Yeah.
Yes, and children are bringing more and more trauma into the classroom these days as well. And so even just a morning circle with children and just how are you feeling? And just, if anybody wants to talk about how they're feeling, just do a few rounds of tapping just to start the day, and clear the energy that they're bringing in the morning.
Yes, and as you mentioned before, with children, it's pretty simple, and we could do that quickly because they are not like an adult. They not have all the background of emotion behind.
Yes. Yeah. Things don't stick as much. And I found things like anger and fear are so quick to relinquish when you're tapping with children often because there aren't the layers.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that's why I think for a teacher, it's wonderful because it's not so complicated to use.
No, it's not. And I think, tapping goes along with so many lessons about the emotions, like anger. I mean, I never learned what to do with my anger when I was a child. I learned that I wasn't allowed to scream or yell. And I learned that if I got angry, I might have to go to my room.
Yeah.
So what lesson was I learning about anger? That I needed to suppress it. And so now I like to teach children about anger. One little girl came back from gym one day and she was so angry. She was a 10 out of 10. She'd been told to leave the gym class. I don't know what happened, but I said to her, what happened? And she just muttering. I said, and she said somebody's name. And I said, oh, would you like to write him an apology card? There was no way, it was his fault and she wasn't budging. And so I said, well, would you like to stay mad or would you like some help getting over it? Because I like to give children a choice, right? Some of them like to stay mad for a while. And she chose to do some tapping and we tapped for just 2 minutes on her anger. And it was, I'm just so mad. I'm so mad. And I'm so mad. And then I just said, he had no right to do that. I didn't even know what he did. I just knew that was how she was feeling. And I'm so furious. He had no right. And it's okay to be angry. I'm entitled to be angry. And so then after 2 rounds, I said, how are you doing? And she said, better. And I said, are you still feeling angry? And she said, no, I kind of feel sorry now. And I said, oh, would you like to go and make him a little sorry card? Okay. That was 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So
now I like to teach children about anger, I have a lesson in my book about, I have a pop can and I talk to them about like a soda and I shake it up.
Oh.
And I talk to them about anger and anger, we feel it inside and how we feel when we feel it. And I said, it's like this pop can, you just feel so angry inside, but what do you do with your anger? Mm-hmm. So we have a discussion about that. And I say to them, it's not good to keep it all inside because then you have all of this turbulence like this pop can. But I said, but what happens if you open the lid and you let it all out?
Wow.
And then it goes all over everybody. And that doesn't make people feel good either. And so this is a really good lesson because I have another pop can. And Brad Yates actually told me this. He said, if you tap on the lid of a pop can after shaking it, it will diffuse the bubbles. So I shake the pop can. I said, well, this is what we can use when we're angry. We can tap. And so we'll just tap. They tap. Even though I'm mad, I'm still an awesome kid. I just tap on the pop can. And then when I open this bottle or this can.
Just put your video back, please.
Oh, okay. We might have to do this whole thing again.
I don't know. We could tap. On the video.
Yeah.
And it's better to be stressful. Yeah. So yes, anyway. Let us know what you did with the
So when I open the second pop can after tapping on it, and the kids are all tapping, the bubbles don't splat.
Ah, cool.
So we talk about how tapping is a really, really great tool for acknowledging your anger and expressing your anger and letting your anger flow without having a great big explosive temper tantrum, or without just stuffing it inside. There's ways we can express anger that are safe and appropriate.
I like this picture. Yeah, very great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I will use that again.
Well, I think I found as I taught, there were more and more explosive children in the classroom that were just blowing up like volcanoes, and it affects everyone around them. It affects the classroom environment as well. So I think lessons in what to do with anger are really important.
Yes, and I totally agree with the fact that when you address the anger of someone, it has an impact on all the classroom.
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
one child could be very disturbing for the others.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and also I think another really important lesson is the forgiveness aspect that goes with the tapping, right? That you come to a peaceful place and you are much, much more capable of forgiving others
mm-hmm.
and forgiving yourself too. And one time my kids, they had a water fight in the classroom when I was out at lunch, and I came back and they knew that they shouldn't have done this, and I was not happy. But and the others went to gym, and I called them up and I said to them, okay, we're going to talk about this. But I just started tapping and I said, okay, even though you did something wrong and you messed up, you're still awesome kids. Because we need to teach them that too. They're going to make mistakes in life. And there's going to be consequences for their mistakes, but we still love them and we forgive them, and that we can work through these things.
It's really wonderful to listen to that, because there are so many ways to use EFT.
Yes, that's what I found. It's so versatile.
And we're really privileged to listen to you today.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah.
Because we have so many years example of using teaching in the classroom. Like,
mm-hmm.
just let us know. And it's the funny thing is, I could tap on myself today. For example, you're talking about public speaking, and I remember the first time I talked to you, it was very fluent with my English, and I don't know, but today I could tap.
Oh. But I think tapping is
on the morning time too.
Yes, you're early. And also tapping is great for, we have a tendency as human beings, we have a tendency to beat ourselves up if we're not perfect, right? Oh no, I did this wrong. And I think tapping is excellent for letting go of perfectionism. I always would, I don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. Why should I have to be perfect?
We don't.
Yeah. And exactly. Because
and just tapping let me know that finally, even the fact that you are not perfect is even a good example for the other not to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowing themselves to be free to be themselves.
I think so. I think a lot of children, surprisingly, are running with perfectionist tendencies at a very early age.
Yeah.
And
what a shame.
And they are very self-critical, and we know as adults, so many people are running with, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving, I'm not lovable, all these beliefs that get trapped. And if we can just allow children to make mistakes and not be perfect, and have a tool for getting through times that are challenging, I think this is what EFT does for them. So I really think it's a gift for ourselves and for the kids.
Totally agree. And because it's a self tool we can use.
Yes.
Tool everywhere. We
don't
want to do that with us. We can do that ourselves alone.
Yes.
And that's like Brad used to say, you have your two fingertips like a wand, and you're using them everywhere, and it's magical.
That's right. And I'll sometimes say to the children, do you know what this sign means? It was back in the 60s, we all said peace. So now just put your fingers together, because tapping is a tool that brings peace to ourselves.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So lovely things to listen with all this story. And I think, we're going to stop in 5 minutes, but if you have some other story, or just to let us know finally. Oh yeah, I would like to ask you, do you have story about children who are no adults, and if you met them I don't know, somewhere, and they could let you know if they're using finally EFT in their adult life?
Oh, there's a cute story of a girl. She had a lot of struggles in my class, and then she moved away. And when she was 16 years old, she came to visit a friend of mine, and she was watching a movie with her. And she said to her, you know, Chris, I still tap whenever I'm upset. And it was just so cute, you know, because when we have these tools as a child, we can go back to them anytime we want. And so, you know, these kids, they've had tapping, they know it works. And so I don't keep in touch with a lot of my children once they graduate and get older, but you know, you hear of the old odd child who becomes an adult, and oh yeah, I've used tapping for this or this, and so it's great. And the parents too, the children who have taught their parents to tap have used it too in the community, and they have gone. You know, I had a girl once. She was a friend of my friend's daughter, and she was racing and representing Canada in Europe, mountain bike racing. And she phoned me the night before because she was so anxious about this. And I just tapped with her. And she came back, and as she was 20 years old, and she came back to our school to tell the kids about how great tapping was, because I think she'd come in third in the mountain bike race.
Wow.
But again, there's someone who would have maybe not gone in because they would have let the fear get the best of them, and they would have decided not to try. And so for any, like fear, it's just so many things, because I'm scared. And when we have it to get over the fear and be resilient, that's great. So, yeah.
No, so I think we need studies just on finally some research about following, you know, the following of using tapping in school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When they grow up and when they are adults. It would be great to have this kind of...
It would, because the traumas, as we were talking about, the traumas that we can help relieve right away when they're children, they won't have that emotional baggage when they grow up. And I found, I was in a car accident once, and I tapped right away all day for the trauma, the physical and the emotional, just for anything. And I wasn't even talking, I just tapped. Yeah. And I was the only one in that car accident who didn't have emotional and physical trauma as a result.
Yeah.
So,
and just, if you can, just put your video for the last time.
Stop again? Oh. Okay. If this doesn't work, we might have to redo the whole thing.
No, I think it just sometimes I have the problem a little bit with you to listen because it's freezing too. But I think I will be able to make a translation for everyone in French. But I just want to say thank you very much to let us know, everything about your experience, and it's so marvelous to.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's just been a wonderful opportunity to blend my love for children and teaching and tapping together. So I feel very privileged to have had this and to connect with teachers all around the world too. So
yeah, and I hope it will be an impact with this summit,
yes.
Of course, I will put a link to your website where people could find your book, and yes, for the English book, and I will do the same for the French version.
And if they have any questions, as long as they ask me in English, I'd be happy to or hear of experiences around the world too. It's lovely to hear about other people doing this work in the classrooms.
Yes, and I really recommend your book because you cover so many case studies, how to use tapping, and how it could be very useful for building resilience with children. And I really recommend this book. I found it really great, and so I will let you to your busy life.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you again, Patsy.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.